And we have a very special guest, very popular guest, one of our most popular, I would say, because this man has vision into the future like nobody else. So today we'll be talking about 2016. You know, back in 2002, I published a book called Rich Dad's Prophecy, and I said that the biggest stock market crash in history was also real estate crash, everything. The biggest crash would come in 2016. And so far, I'm on time, on schedule, but this is my concern. Again, that was in 2002. I began writing Prophecy in 1998, and that was before the dot-com crash. But my concern is today, on the bad news side, is today it's much worse than I ever thought it would be in 2002. So a very important show for you to stand by, because let's say I'm correct, and let's say that 2016 is the biggest crash in the history of the world. And just a little side note on this, in the first 10 years of this new, century, between 2000 and 2010, we've had three major crashes already. So to be on target for 2016, I'm not that far off course. We had the dot-com, we had the subprime crash, and we had the stock market crash, and the world still has not yet recovered. So if 2016 comes true, and it is the biggest crash in world history, could it be the next depression or stagnation? But the biggest question is, what are you going to do? And that's why this program is so important. And by the way, I want to welcome a very new station to us. It's from our hometown, KHVH. It's where also our guest is from, in Honolulu, Hawaii. So welcome, Hawaii. Thank you, and welcome to the Rich Dad Radio Show. So it's a very important time, 2016. Rich Dad's prophecy said it would come down, and it's coming down. So the question is, what are you going to do? Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, this is going to be a great show, because the one question we get time and time again is, where am I going to put my money? What am I going to do with my money? What should I invest in? Where should I go? And so here's what I love about Bert, who's our guest today. We're talking about 2016, and Bert, I would say, is our closest thing to a crystal ball, because here's what's so great about Bert. He pays attention to things that the media's not talking about, that Wall Street's not talking about, that economists are not talking about, and he's looking at things that are making the biggest impact. And so he's going to open up your eyes to things that are happening, and he has been right on so many times with his predictions. So the time of this show is perfect.
So Bert Dohrmann is also the author of Prelude to a Meltdown, he called The Last Crashes, The Coming China Crisis, so those are his books, that we're in a China crisis right now. And Bert is a professional trader, investor, analyst. He's a founder of Dohrmann Capital Research. And he is one of our favorite guests because his crystal ball is crystal clear. So for those of you wondering what's going to happen in 2016, this is for you. Because we don't know if it's going to bounce like it did in 2009. This one may not bounce back. So welcome to the program, Bert, and let's hear your ideas on what's going on in the market, and what do you think about my prediction for 2016 being the biggest of all?
Well, hello, Robert and Kim. It's wonderful to speak to you again. You are so right, and you are truly a prophet. When you forecast in 2002 that 2016 could be the big one, that's amazing. So where is your crystal ball?
Well, what the thing is, Bert, in 2002, if I knew it was going to be this bad in 2015, I just can't believe how bad it's gotten. I mean, it's not gotten it's getting worse and worse and worse. And you're the guy, we're from Hawaii. I've known you for years in this whole thing. But have you ever seen it this bad?
No, but what's most amazing to me is that so few people see it. It's just like 2007. When I wrote that book, Prelude to Meltdown, in 2007, people thought it was nuts. Yet to even think that 2008 could have a global crisis, like I said, it's going to be similar to 1929, not the same, but similar. And it happened. And people just would not believe it. I remember going to a restaurant in 2008. My son even said, Dad, where's your big recession? Look at the restaurant is packed. And, it was a restaurant in Beverly Hills. And when you go by these things, people use their plastic. People live off of their plastic cards. And it's always the last thing. So you don't want to go by that. You want to look below the surface. You want to look at all the indicators that no one else is looking at. And this is what we've been doing successfully for 38 years.
And what are some of the indicators you're looking at, Bert, today that people aren't paying attention
to? For example, when you listen to all the economists from Wall Street, they tell you about the wonderful jobs market. But they never take 15 minutes to look at the website of the Department of Labor and how they calculate these numbers. If they count as a job, it will ask you in a household survey. They call 70,000 people, okay? And the 70,000 people, they ask, have you worked in the last month? And they say, no, I haven't. They say, wait a minute, let's define that. Haven't you done anything in the last month? They say, well, I mowed the lawn for my father-in-law, okay? They say, so you did have a job. No, but I didn't get paid for it. It doesn't matter if you got paid for it. Even if you didn't get paid, it's counted as a job. How many times did you mow the lawn? Oh, I think about 5 times during the month. Oh, so you had 5 jobs during the month. This is how they count.
Oh, that's
and this
scary.
is described on the Department of Labor website, okay? Now, but economists, they're too busy getting their PhD, and so they don't have any time to do some real homework.
And Bert, you bring up a good point. You talk about jobs, because I was just talking to a gentleman that I know at my gym, and he builds kiosks. And I said, what are you working on right now? He goes, well, I got one big project coming up. And what he's going to do is he's going to be building these kiosks for a small company called McDonald's all throughout the world, because McDonald's is concerned about the increasing wages of its workers. So they're already planning on firing workers throughout the world at McDonald's and replacing them with kiosks.
Now, this is fascinating, Kim, that you say this. I didn't know it, but this is fascinating. And I've been saying, fast food is going to be robotized.
Yep.
And this is probably what you're talking about,
exactly.
What they're talking about. It's going to be all automated. That means a huge job loss in the fast food industry. And this is the politicians in their wisdom say, just with a stroke of a pen, we can give people a higher income. It's not going to come out of our pocket. It comes out of the pocket of the business owners. And then they wonder why it doesn't happen. It's just like the Federal Reserve. They pump $4 trillion of artificially created money into the system. They say, wow, money makes things go. No, the money isn't money. It's artificial. It's stuck as an accounting entry in the banks. And the banks send that money right back to the Federal Reserve, and it's sitting there at the Federal Reserve as bank reserves. It never goes into the economy.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our guest today is Bert Dohmen, and his website is dohmencapital.com. He is the editor or publisher of the Wellington Letter. And what we're talking about today, as we get ready for 2016, is 2016 the year the whole world economy comes crashing down, which is what I predicted in my book, Rich Dad's Prophecy, back in 2002. I could not imagine it being any worse today than, in 2002 or 1998 when I started this whole hallucination, as you said, Bert, nobody believed me. And so I also said there would be a preliminary crash prior to 2016, and that happened in 2007 when the Dow rounded the top at 14,000 and headed down again with the subprime crisis. Let me say this again. In the last 10 years, we have had 3 major crashes that are far bigger than the 1929 crash. Now we have China in trouble right now, and Europe's in trouble. So in your latest Wellington letter, you talk about a little bit of what's going on in Europe and the oil patch and all this. But you say something here which is very, very important to all you baby boomers with a 401k and all this stuff. Listen to this. About 30% of the EU nations, European Union, have negative benchmark interest rates. In other words, what that means is you have to pay money to keep your money in a European bank. What does that mean, Bert?
Really, no one knows the final consequences of this negative interest rate. This is the first time in the history that it has happened. The Central Bank of Europe yesterday lowered the negative rate even more from 0.2% negative to 0.3% negative. And so they think that this will stimulate because interest rates are now negative lower. I don't know how they can conclude that this is negative. It reminds me when I was in college And my degree is in chemistry, but I took some economic courses just to find out why economists are always so wrong. I found out very quickly. And so I had 2 years of economics, and I had debates with teachers all the time. I said, but this isn't true. This doesn't work. Look at the math, And I can say the same thing again here now. If you have negative interest rates, it actually takes money out of the system. Because you're charging people to keep their money in the bank. Now, what their intent is that people shouldn't keep their savings in a bank; they should spend it. Okay.
Well, they want you to put it back into the economy or invest it, right? That's what they're trying to force you to do.
Yes.
So
it doesn't happen. It actually depletes savings. I made this calculation because all the economists always say, "Yeah, we don't know why all the stimulus hasn't boosted the economy more." No, the thing is. The ZIRP policy, ZIRP stands for Zero Interest Rate Policy of the Federal Reserve. So all the retired people, they have no income now anymore. They used to live off their CD income, their money market fund income, etc. Now it's zero. Okay. There are $220 trillion of loans in the economy. If you take the difference of, let's say, normal interest rates might have been 5 or 6%. Let's say 6%. 6% of 2.2. That's you got over over $13 trillion of interest income that those loans would have generated. Now, let's say they're generating close to zero. That's $13 trillion of income that is missing in the economy.
But worse,
and no one ever thinks about that.
But worse than that, it's more than the economy. It's the individual, the old guys, the baby boomers who are counting on their savings. And right now the stock market is all-time high. And if it plunges, that means that baby boomers, who were the luckiest generation in world history, may soon be the most unlucky. So that's what we're talking about today. And Bert said it, and I've said it, and Kim is saying it. I have never seen it this bad, yet most people don't even know it's happening. So you can listen to this program with our special guest, Bert Doman, at RichDadRadio.com. And today we're talking about 2016. Because back in, actually it was 1998, I started writing my book, Rich Dad's Prophecy, and I was predicting the biggest stock market crash coming in 2016. So that's 2016. Rich Dad's Prophecy was published in 2002, and my concern for all people listening right now, that the situation has gotten far worse than I could have ever imagined back in 1998. Because the only reason I made the forecast is, number one, I don't trust my government. I don't trust the Federal Reserve Bank. I think Greenspan is an idiot. And I think the guy Bernanke is worse than Greenspan, because they just kept printing money to prop up the economy, prop up the stock market. And now it is at unbelievable proportions. On top of that, the euro is crashing, the European Union is crashing, and China is crashing. So, if anybody out there sitting go, well, I don't have to worry, I'm an American, you got to be kidding me right now. But I think 2016 is going to be, at minimum, an interesting year. And for those of you who are baby boomers who are counting on your savings and your 401k or your IRA, you might be in for a rude awakening if Rich Dad's prophecy comes true, that 2016 is the year that possibly the world economy goes down. What do you think, Kim?
Well, I think it was fascinating what we were just talking about in the last segment about European banks having charging people to keep their money in the bank and this negative savings rate. So my first question to Bert, is it possible that this can happen in the U.S., that they could have negative savings rates?
Yes, because the people at the FOMC, that's the Federal Open Market Committee that set the interest rates, really believe in fairy tales. They believe that going to zero interest rates didn't do enough for the economy. Therefore, going to negative interest rates will do even more. The real problem is the lack of income from money market funds, CDs, etc., for the average person, especially the retired people. That income is gone. Now they're even going to punish people for having money in the bank. This is terrible, absolutely terrible. Only economics professors can come up with such stupid
Amen.
theories. Ben Bernanke was an economics professor. Greenspan was not. He was a free market economics, which is just a little bit better. But Bernanke, to think that zero interest rates, to think that printing over $4 trillion of artificial money can do anything good in the economy is stupidity, is absolute stupidity. We should have a rule that no professor can be the head of the Federal Reserve.
Amen.
Once again, our guest today is Bert Doman. He's a professional trader. He's a fellow Hawaiian, and he's in Hawaii as we speak. Bert is a professional trader, investor, analyst. He's the founder of Doman Capital Research, and he has been giving his analysis and forecast to traders for over 36 years. And ladies and gentlemen, he is deadly accurate. So our discussion today is, what are you going to do? It's like, when Kim and I were really happy in 2007 when the market crashed, because we knew we already had our money ready to go. We bought. But in 2016, I don't know. It may stay down for a while. So we're having a discussion with Bert right now. What does his crystal ball say? He has been very accurate. My prediction of 2016 has been fairly accurate. And right now, as we're talking, China's in trouble. But also an interesting about China is this yuan, or the renminbi, whatever they call it, is now part of SDR, the special drawing rights, and it was allowed in by the IMF as one of the global currencies. So it is up there with the dollar, the yen, the euro, and the pound sterling. The interesting thing about the Chinese currency being inside the mix is this. They're a low-wage country. You see, all the other countries like Japan, England, U.S., Europe were high-wage countries. So on December 1st, they were admitted in by the IMF to this elite group of global currencies, and they are a low-wage country. So question for all of you there who are counting on a pay raise and all this, you might be sorely disappointed. Most people don't know the world is having problems financially. I talk to most Americans, they're shopping at Christmas right there, they're having a good time. So Bert, what would you say right now to most people who are unaware of what's going on?
This is the most difficult question that can be posed right now. I've been preaching for a long time that buying and holding a specific investment is counterproductive and can be the road to ruin. There are many companies that if you had done that, you would have lost all of your money. Eastman Kodak, right? Do you remember that?
Yep.
There's so many companies that have gone by the wayside. They were part of the Nifty 50s that was advertised in 1973 by Wall Street here, 50 stocks that you can just hold and forget. Well, many of these stocks have gone by the wayside. My opinion is that the markets are going to go into convulsions over the next several years. Deflationary forces worldwide are going to get worse and worse, and I put that in the last Wellington letter, the special bulletin, had charts that say, people only talk about oil prices going down. Look at all of the other commodities that are going down. We had some other charts like the DBC Commodity Index, the DBA, which is the Agricultural Commodity Index. All of these indices show you that deflation is the big problem. Oil is not an isolated market. It is a commodity. So we're seeing these huge deflationary pressures trying to push everything down and trying to implode this debt pyramid. Debt pyramids in the past had always been remedied by the Federal Reserve producing inflation. Okay, inflation makes the debt get smaller in actual terms because the numbers get smaller. Remember an ice cream cone when I was in high school was 10 cents. Now it's over $3. This time it's not working. They've been trying to re-inflate the economy. It's really interesting. It's laughable. The economy now talks about the difficulty of producing inflation. Oh, God, we've been trying everything, and we can't get inflation to rise. It used to be that the Federal Reserve was there to stop inflation, right? So now they see that the deflationary forces have become much bigger than they are. But whenever you get to the bottom of a sharp decline, they go in there again. The Federal Reserve, together with the U.S. Treasury, are allowed to buy index futures on the stock market, like the S&Ps, et cetera. And this is what they do. This is what they did at the end of September. And they produced the October rally in the stock market. They go in there and they buy these index futures.
So are you saying
market manipulation?
Are you saying the markets are manipulated by our own government?
From A to Z.
Right.
That sums it up.
So the way you can make a lot of money out of this, and our Smart Trader, which is short-term trading advisory service, you do your own trading. It's not, we don't manage money, and but we go in for these shorter-term moves, and the average holding period might be maybe 6 days, 8 days, something like that for a position. So it's beautiful in this time, and you can really add to your current income if you get to be a proficient trader. And this is so important in times like these, that you have an additional source of income. But you have to do work. Anything worthwhile in life requires work. You have to read. You have to study. You have to know how to interpret charts. So, this is, in my opinion, the only way to go, because the markets are going to be so volatile. The buy and hold investor. Do you know right now, today, as we speak, the S&P is at the same level where it was exactly 1 year ago. 1 year ago. That means that all of these big ups and downs haven't gone anywhere in the stock market. And this is the most widely manipulated index. If you take a look at the indices that they don't really manipulate, like the 2,000 small cap stocks, or the NYSE Composite Index, which is all of the stocks on the New York Stock Exchange, they're far below where they were in December of last year.
So what you're saying is the person, the old religion was all you had to do was save money and invest for the long term in your 401k, your IRA, and you could retire to Happy Land. And are you saying to that person right now, which is what I say, those days might be over?
Oh, they are definitely over.
Yeah. So I think that's really the frightening thing, because, back in 1970, I could get about 15% interest on my savings. So about $1 million, I got $150,000 in income, interest. And that you could live on $150,000, even in Hawaii. But today you put $1 million in the bank, and what do you get? Nothing. And as we talked about earlier, they have so much cash right now, because as Bert said earlier while we were at break, he says people start paying off their debt and all this, but they're not re-employing their money. They don't know where to put that money. So the banks are flush with cash, and that's why the interest rates are negative, because they don't want to pay you interest on your money. The biggest problem today in the economy is there's too much cash, and people don't know what to do with it.
And where are they using this cash? People don't realize, but the derivatives, this is where the banks speculate with depositors' money, okay? For example, derivatives holdings of Goldman & Sachs are 563% of the amount of risk capital that they have in their books.
What does that mean?
Well, it's $45 trillion in total. 45 trillion with a T, not billion. This is the derivative holdings that they have. Total derivative in the holdings in U.S. banks is about $200 trillion. $200 trillion. You compare that to the GDP of the United States, which is the entire amount of transactions in our economy. It's around $17 trillion.
But what does it mean to you and me, the average guy who has not idea what you're talking about right now? What does this mean?
Yeah. The derivatives is the amount of speculation. It's of course they say, well, we have many of these derivatives are offset with other derivatives. But when the whole house starts shaking, then these derivatives are no longer very good. We saw this in AIG. AIG had $564 billion with a B dollars of derivatives on its books. AIG, the big insurance company,
right?
They found this, just speculating in derivatives and writing what they call credit default swaps was a good way to get income until nobody paid off on
right.
Then the taxpayer had to pay $180 billion to bail out AIG and keep it from failing. $180 billion it cost the U.S. taxpayer to bail out one company that was speculating in derivatives.
So what you're saying, the derivatives market is even bigger than ever before. And we're talking about a very important subject, because back in 2002, I wrote a book called Rich Dad's Prophecy, which predicted the biggest stock market crash was coming in 2016. I also predicted there would be a crash prior to the 2016 crash, which turned in 2007, which led to this huge crash. Once again, we have had 3 major crashes in 10 years. And people are still saying, well, the economy's fine. I'm just going to do the same thing. All I'm saying here, younger guys have some time to recover. But you baby boomers, you might be in sorry shape if you're still buying the old dogma of save money and invest for the long term in the stock market, because you're the guys that might get wiped out. So that's why this is very important to listen to. Our special guest today is Bert Doman, professional investor, trader, fellow Hawaiian. He's been giving advice for 36 years. He's the author of Prelude to a Meltdown, which predicted the 2007 crash. He's also the China crisis, which nobody listened to. His website is domancapital.com. And for all of those, once again, who are saving money at 0% and hoping your 401k stays above the line, you'd better listen to this part of the program, because we've been talking about what you can do. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, I want to know, what can we do? Because right now the forecast is not pretty. It's very gloomy, and people are probably sitting there going, "Oh my God, well, what am I supposed to do now? I'm not going to get any interest in my savings. People are losing their jobs. The economy's crashing." So, Bert, what can people do?
That is a very difficult question, but you want to go to something that's safe. A lot of people have been reaching for yield the last 5 years, trying to get more yield. So they buy junk bonds, and their junk bonds right now are yielding 6.5%. A few months ago, it was 5.5%. So that means that junk bond prices are going down as the yields go up. However, what very few people are looking at is the lower part of the junk bond market, which is the triple C rated. The yield just jumped up to 16.6%, a new record high. That means that if they were 8% a few months ago, yielding 8%, that means that they have plunged about 50% in price. Okay, so these are the canaries in a mine that we're looking at. We're looking at China. China has been allegedly the locomotive of the world for the last 15 years, okay? All the demand from China. What's happening in China right now? They're having a monumental crisis, and it's not over. Don't let anybody tell you that it's a wonderful China. The Chinese government will be taking care of things.
But Bert,
yeah.
Didn't you say that the Chinese real estate boom, like in Hawaii? Now, welcome to all listeners at KHVH. Well, Kim and I are from Hawaii. Our boat sits there in Hawaii. And most of those new condominiums down in Kaka'ako are bought by Chinese. And all over Singapore, Sydney, Australia, Taiwan, the Chinese are buying all this real estate. Is that over?
Yes, over 70% of those sales that you refer to in Honolulu are to Asian buyers, okay?
Right.
Primarily Chinese, okay?
Right.
And they don't buy them just to live in. They buy them as an investment.
No, but also I heard in Taiwan that the Chinese are having a clawback. They're now coming after those guys who move that money out of the country. So they want that money back.
Yes.
So the Chinese aren't
government
stupid.
Is now cracking.
Yeah.
The Chinese government is cracking down on this illegal outflow of money. They have currency controls in China. You're not allowed to take a lot of money out of the country, but people have been finding ways to do it anyway, okay?
So the
government is cracking down on that.
Yeah, so the boom in real estate in New York, San Francisco, Hawaii, Sydney, Taiwan, Singapore, it's over, right?
And Vancouver, exactly.
And Vancouver.
We were just in Hong Kong. A couple months ago, and they're not talking about China being this great boom. They're very concerned. They know that all their exports have slowed. They're looking at ways to go internally to boost the economy instead of depending on exports. They know all this, but it's for some reason the U.S. still thinks China's the golden egg.
See, this is the shrinking process that we are seeing everywhere in the world. And if you take any one of these things and people say, yeah, but that's because of this. And then you look at another area, yeah, that's because of something else. Hong Kong home sales are down at a new record low, lower than any time. Here, I've got a chart since 1996, okay? This is a 41.7% decline from the same time last year. That is huge. The sales have come to a screeching halt. And, I was in Hong Kong last year. You could probably update me on what you saw. But when I was there was construction cranes all over the place. It looked like Dubai just before the crash, And in Dubai in 2007, I said Dubai is going to be the biggest real estate disaster in the history of mankind. And it was. Okay, and now you're going to see the same thing happening in Hong Kong, and the outflow of money from China has stopped. The demand for commodities from China has stopped. Everything that depended on Chinese demand has stopped. Australia is going to be in a deep recession. They're going to have a real estate crash in Australia, which they haven't had for 30 years. Okay, and so everything right now is global. in 2008, the big financial crisis was basically a subprime mortgage crisis, and the derivatives that the Wall Street created with those, they put them into pools and then sold participations in these subprime mortgage pools around the world. They got a AAA rating. They bought from the rating agencies, and they sold them to gullible investors across the world. And then the subprime mortgages all defaulted. You know, many of the last ones that they created, they had a 90% default rate in a year. 90% default rate.
And they,
so
and they got paid.
What went into the pools.
And they got paid billions for it, and nobody went to jail.
Exactly. Nobody was even prosecuted for that. So
and
now
these guys,
we have the same thing. Auto sales. Look they're doing the same thing with auto sales right now.
Yeah.
If you can fog a mirror, if you can breathe, you can get an auto loan for 8 years. The car will fall apart after 5, but you have an 8-year. So I think subprime mortgages were probably better quality because you had some real estate behind it. But now you've got a used car as collateral.
That's really good. Hey, so we're talking about what can we do? You know, like I said, 2007 was really good for Kim and I because we bought like crazy because we knew they would pump it back up again. But this time, I don't know if they can pump it back up. And, you know, we were talking earlier in the first part of this program about what happens if we go to negative interest rates. And you said the outlier, the possibility is we go to helicopter money, like helicopter Ben Bernanke talked about, where they would just drop money on the economy. What do you think the chances of that are?
Yeah, this is the great unknown because even the Federal Reserve has no idea. But the whole thing is everybody's just reacting. There's no planning. If anybody thinks that the Federal Reserve leads the markets and controls the market, they probably think that little bird sitting on top of a rhinoceros going through the jungle, that little bird is guiding the rhino. It doesn't work that way. You know, the Federal Reserve is reactive, and we should get the Federal Reserve out of the interest rate control situation.
Yeah, well, that's not going to happen for a couple of years. So,
that will never happen
now,
because it's a money game.
Right now. So here we're an all-time high. I think we're at 17,000 on the Dow and all this. It's actually a good time if you are an active trader. I'm pitching you
if you're an active trader.
I'm pitching you an opportunity to pitch your trader letter. I want people not to commit suicide before the program's over.
You have to go with the flow, and right now, you know, until the year end, you want to be on the positive side of the market. You know, very often we're short some stocks and we're long other stocks. You know, this is a good way to do it. So you're basically hedged. You know, you sell short the weakest and you buy the strongest. So this is the way to make money in this type of an environment.
Right. So what is that service you have from Doman Capital?
Well, it's called Smart Trader. Smart Trader, and it comes out almost daily, unless it's a very boring day.
So let's say somebody's a 401k guy, and then they haven't done any trading at all. How long would it take them to actually be able to use your services?
Well, we try to make sure that we don't get any real neophytes or beginners. People should first read a few books on trading.
Yeah, that'll never happen. So what else can we do here?
Then they shouldn't do it.
Well,
if you're not willing to work at something, you know, I mean, you don't get to be a doctor by just saying one day, I'm going to be a doctor, and then you put on a stethoscope and you start seeing patients. That's not the way the world works.
So, Bert, if somebody's not willing to read and get brought up to speed, and they're not willing to invest in their education, but they've got their money in the stock market and they've got their stockbroker, but they're not paying attention to it, they're just letting their stockbroker do their thing, should they stay in or should they get out?
No, they should get out. They should get out over the next 3 weeks. Okay? They should sell, and we've been recommending don't put your money in regular money market funds. They're very unsafe. They have so much garbage in there, just like 2008. We recommended that, and you know what happened? Then one huge money market fund broke the buck, as they say. And actually, they had so many losses that it went below $1 a share, okay? And then the government had to come in and bail the money market funds out. They guaranteed the deposits in money market funds and so on. We're going to see something like this again, except this time around the government is not going to guarantee it, okay? So you want to get into money market funds that invest only in U.S. Treasuries. This is important to you. Write this down, U.S. Treasuries. If the money market doesn't invest in only U.S. Treasuries, don't get into it. They've got another thing which is kind of deceptive. They say government money market funds. It's not the same. Government money funds can have the papers, CDs, and so on from the GSEs, that's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Okay, I don't consider them very safe.
Wow.
No.
So you want U.S. Treasury money market.
And
funds.
why are
Write
U.S.
that down.
Treasury money markets so good?
Because they only have T-bills or T-notes, short term,
Right.
from
Short-term.
from the U.S. Treasury. That's the safest thing in the world. And when there's a real crisis out there, if it happens, of course, there are no guarantees. Maybe they'll find some ingenious way to just postpone again. They've been able to do this for some time. But you want to have the safest instrument in the world, and for any big money worldwide, U.S. Treasuries are the safest thing that you can have. It's better than putting the money under your mattress. And you sleep better, too, because it makes for a lumpy mattress.
So once again, it's
that's
Robert
one thing.
Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Bert Doman. He is the founder of Doman Capital, and he's also the editor and publisher of the Wellington Letter. And what is the price of your Wellington Letter, which is something our whole company reads like the Bible?
$49 a month. And, so once in a while, somebody says, oh, that's too expensive. $49 a month is too expensive to keep you on the right side of the markets? Give me a break. If somebody thinks it's too expensive, please don't sign up.
Right, and I just want to say that we don't endorse the Wellington Letter, but it's a great resource, and we do read it. But we're not here endorsing it. You guys got to make up your own mind.
Yeah, I would suggest you listen to what Bert has to say, plus everything we say on Rich Dad Radio, because we don't really take a position. That means we just want people to hear what the person has to say, but we also have to disclose that we subscribe to the Wellington Letter. I'll just say this much: he has been ungodly accurate. So, Bert, I want to really thank you for your time and your optimism here.
He actually is quite optimistic because he knows what to do when no matter what
if you
this
know,
economy
if you know
does.
where you're headed, it doesn't mean where you're headed. You can benefit from it.
Yeah. So all of you guys out there who are investing for the long term in the stock market and are saving money, I would listen to what Bert Doman has to say. So once again, Bert, thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Well, listen, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I wish you and your listeners a wonderful holiday season here, and all the best in 2016.
Yeah.
Be alert. Start reading about the market. Start taking it seriously, because no one has more interest in your money than you do.
Well said.
Especially in today's program from our special guest, Bert Doman.
And I think one of the most important things Bert said in the program was, if you're not willing to pay attention, that's why I really appreciate our listeners, because you're listening to all of these different guests and experts. But if you're not willing to do what it takes, if you're not willing to read, if you're not willing to study, if you're not willing to be actively involved with your money, then get out of the market. Don't pretend you're going to make money on something you know nothing about. So you really got to put in the time and the effort.
Right. So anyway, we went back at Ask Robert. You can submit your questions right now to RichDadRadio.com to Ask Robert. So Melissa, what's the first question?
Our first question today comes from William in Dallas, Texas. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. With the current market conditions, what will society look like when it hits hyperinflation? What businesses will do well and which won't?
Well, that's a good question, but I don't know about hyperinflation. I think we might go to collapse. And there's a difference between hyperinflation and collapse. If we go to collapse, then we have all this helicopter money pumping in, but it won't make any difference. If you saw my book, Second Chance, you should look at the pictures of the German Weimar Republic where they're actually sweeping the streets with money. They're just cleaning it up here. So the reason I'm concerned, the reason I wrote Rich Dad's Prophecy and book Second Chance and everything we do here, is you really got to invest in your financial education and be prepared. That's what Bert said. What I do, what Bert does, we don't do what Bert does. We don't trade the markets. But we are actively doing what we do. For example, we spent a lot of money and time reconverting Rich Dad over to a tech company. From an old-time company, we're now a tech company. So we can respond to the market quicker and all this. If you're doing nothing, you're in trouble. The other thing Kim and I have done, we've invested a lot in real estate. We've made fortunes in real estate after the 2007 crash. Is this going to happen again? I don't know. And that's why Rich Dad's Prophecy was such an important book, because what happens now, who knows? We have never, ever been here in the history of the world. Nobody knows You know, back in 1921, there wasn't a China. You know, China was a poor, struggling rice paddy country. Now it's an economic world power, and it's going down. Europe's going down. They get zero interest rates on your money. The stock market is an all-time high, and they're still printing. So that's why we have the Rich Dad Company. That's why we have Bert on the program, is because what you do, I will just be prepared for whatever happens. So is there going to be hyperinflation? Possibly. Could there be complete collapse? Possibly. Question is, what are you going to do? Which either way. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, we have a lot of great guests on the show, and another guest that we've had is Chris Martenson, who wrote the book Crash Course, and I recommend reading Crash Course because he talks about what happens if it does come all apart, and what do you do, and where do you invest your time and money. He talks very common sense. He's like, there's things that people are just going to need. They're going to need food. They're going to need shelter. They're going to need water. They're going to need energy. So there's things that you could be preparing for now that whatever happens, there's going to be a need for that product or service. So there's so many good resources, but Crash Course is another one.
And we've had our guest, Philip Haslam. He wrote When Money Destroys Countries. Nations.
About the Zimbabwe, when Zimbabwe crashed.
Yeah, Zimbabwe was a collapse. So you want Philip Haslam, Haslan, read his book. Very great book. He talks about how tampons and toilet paper were worth fortunes when it collapsed. So you never know what's going to happen, and that's my point of view. If you think it's going to be like the last crash, I think you're going to be mistaken. So that's why 2016 is such a pivotal year, and that's why we have the Rich Dad Radio Show.
And one other thing is that people always say, oh, well, it'll come back. It'll be okay. Well, it'll just be a bump in the road, and then everything will be. I don't think it's ever going to be the same. We've
never been here before. When you look at what's happening in Europe with all the mass migrations, look at terrorism, what that's going to cost. You know, Janet Yellen, our Fed, doesn't know if terrorism is going to cost us money. I mean, it's already costing us fortunes. Do you know what I mean? So nothing is ever going to be like we are today. What's going to happen in the future? I don't know. But Kim and I, and as Bert says, we've been preparing, but what Bert does is not what we do. The reason I like what Bert does is more people can do what he does. You know, very few people can raise hundreds of millions of dollars and buy real estate like Kim and I and Kenny McElroy do. But you can all do something, okay? Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Jake in South Korea. Favorite book, Unfair Advantage. He says, now that the China stock market has crashed, do you think this is a good time to buy China stocks?
Look, you better do your research on that. You know what I mean? Kim just said, we don't know. Just because it goes down doesn't mean it comes up.
And just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's a good deal.
Yeah. And we don't know what their central bank is going to do, the Bank of China, BOC. I know what our country is going to do. We're going to prop it up. We're going to print more money. The question is, will the Fed propping this thing up work? That's why in his latest letter, Wellington letter, December 3rd, 2015, Bert talks about Helicopter Ben Bernanke, probably the worst Fed chairman we've ever had. He, Obama, and all these guys, and George Bush, they just ripped us off huge because they're incompetent. So if Janet Yellen starts printing money and just drops it up with us, they call them shovel-ready projects. Basically, we're just going to pay people to build roads and bridges and all that. It might work. But Japan tried it, back in 1990. It hasn't worked yet. Japan is still stagnant, and they're in serious financial trouble because the last round of money printing did not work. So that's why I'm saying 2016, get my book called Rich Dad's Prophecy. You'll see that I called it. I also said in Rich Dad's Prophecy, terrorism would be our greatest threat, and it is today. So what you do is up to you. But we've never been here as a world before. And all of this started back in 1971 when President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, which led America to print. Then China came online, and China started sending us great products at very low prices. Unfortunately, every time China sent us great products at Walmart, our money and our jobs went to China. Now it's moving from China to Myanmar to Vietnam. That's where I was just running around the world in Taiwan, Vietnam, Bangkok, and all this stuff. But the world has never been here before. That's what I'm trying to say. And I travel the world and I look at it, and unfortunately, most people have no idea what's going on. So that's why I'm saying pay attention, because I really don't know what's going to happen next. Bert doesn't either, but he has his solution, and Kim and I have our solution. You got to come up with yours. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Courtney in San Diego. Favorite book, Midas Touch. What do you see happening with our financial system in the coming decade? That's her question. What do you see happening in our financial system in the coming decade?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, the optimists really think it's going to be a great time. America's going to be the next coming, and all this stuff. Trump will be reelected, or Hillary will be reelected. I don't think it makes any difference. This has to do with the world financial, the monetary system. And never before has the entire world been running on debt and printed money. And there's never been a China before, like the yuan being admitted to the currencies by the IMF. There's never been a poor country or a low-wage country part of the currency cycle. So all of these things are variables that we've never had before. So pay attention. If I was in California, I'd move. And the reason for that is, it's because your taxes are going to go out of sight. I don't know how you guys survive. Kim and I lived in San Diego, lovely place to visit, but we would never stay there because of your taxes. And even in Arizona, our friend Doug Ducey is a governor. He's fighting the communists inside our own government here. They're called school teachers. They all want more pay. They all want more bureaucracy and all this. They all want bigger government. That's what a communist is. They're not bad people. So Doug's fighting them to keep the state budget down. But they want the budget to go higher. I mean, how do we survive when you got all of these people who expect to be paid with taxpayer money? I don't know. We've never been here before.
Well, there's a good example too. There's so many factors involved, and now they're talking about raising wages, and so they did raise wages in Seattle, in Washington, and there's a slew of companies that are closing down because they cannot afford to pay the people these high prices. So it's very short-sighted, a lot of the decisions that get made, and so as you're saying, Robert, in the Wellington letter, they talk about all these different factors that are going to go into this thing. So you just got to really pay attention.
Just let me say this. When 2007 came, Kim and I were confident we knew it was going to happen. The Fed was going to bail everything out. 2016, we don't know if that's going to happen. Or even if they do bail everything else, what will the long-term effect be? And we started this whole series about Europe now has, you are charged money to keep your money in the bank. So if you're a saver, you're screwed, man. You're screwed if you actually think saving money is smart. Now, the reason they're charging people to have money in the bank because there's too much money in the bank. They want to move it out. They want you to spend it on something. That's what they want. But people are panicking and they're not spending. That's what causes the crash. So when you understand all of these dynamics, as Bert says, that economists are stupid because they don't take into account the human factor, the it factor of what does a human do when they panic. And that's why you better be prepared for it. The Rich Dad Company, I believe, will do extremely well because Kim and I have been preparing for the last 20 years for this time. That's why we formed this company. We could see this coming. Question is, what do you see coming? And that's really the big question here. So I thank you all for listening to the Rich Dad radio program. Once again, welcome KHVH, our special friends out in Hawaii. Remember, the Chinese are stopped coming, so don't count on the Chinese. The last time Kim and I were there, because our boat sits right in front of the big developments, everybody's so excited because the Chinese are coming.
Thousands of condos.
It costs, I think, $600,000. My friend John Finney says it costs $600,000 to even get on the list to buy one of those Chinese condos.